Another binding part is the exclusivity that the buyer will want to have from the seller. The buyer will want the seller to promise that you will not talk to other buyers.
The most exclusive part of the business law.
We are going to talk about the sales exit, and we have started to talk about the 5 steps when you are selling your company. In the last episode, we talked about the NDA, which was the
Non-disclosure agreement.
Non-disclosure agreement. And today we're going to go to step 2, which is the term sheet. And that is a bit tricky.
It is. I know what you're thinking, because that is a non-binding agreement between the buyer and the seller that outlines the major clauses, terms and conditions of the deal. And it has some parts that are binding. So that's the tricky part, right?
Yes, because in my world, either you're binding or non-binding. There's no in between.
So the purpose of the agreement is to outline the non-binding, like the price. And this is before the buyer knows that much about the business. So that's why it will not be non-binding. We agree that we will, if we do the deal, these will be the typical terms. Because if you don't see eye to eye on the major issues, you should not go through, because it's costly to buy and sell a company. So this kind of checking out if we have kind of a deal to be made. And in order to kind of get this whole thing structured, we have the binding parts. And one of the binding parts is that we say that we agree that nothing will be binding until the final agreement.
Yes.
So we have that in writing. Then you cannot hold me liable for anything until we sign the final agreement.
Okay, so that was the binding part.
One of the binding parts. And another binding part is the exclusivity that the buyer will want to have from the seller. The buyer will want the seller to promise that you will not talk to other buyers.
Okay, so is it always these two that are the non-binding on the binding?
No, it can differ. You as a seller can say, no way, I'm going to go out for auction. I'm going to offer my business to everybody. So it's up to you to accept. But if you're approached by a bigger buyer, you most likely will be quite eager to agree. But you should be mindful, because if you can find other buyers, check the market before you sign. And also be mindful for how long is the exclusivity. It should be short.
It should be short. Why?
So you can shop around. And for you as a buyer, it should be long. Because then you can push, and the seller has nowhere else to turn than to you.
Okay, so when you are signing the term sheet about the binding parts, is it only you two, the seller and the buyer, that agrees what should be the binding parts?
Absolutely, it's a contractual.
Okay.
So you can come up with a completely different solution. You can also have what's called a breakup fee, which we discussed in a specific episode. But that says that if what is to happen if we never sign the deal, and both of us have put so much time and effort and monies into the negotiations and the preparations, who shall bear the costs? So there can be other terms and conditions that are binding in the term sheet. It's really up to you. So read it carefully. That's my best advice.
That's your best advice. So this, you could see it as like the pre-buying or the pre-agreement for how the affair is going to be, or what?
Yeah, and that's also a good part, that an experienced buyer will expect the non-binding parts to be transferred into the final agreement. So, as a seller, make sure you agree. Don't sign if you are not in agreement, if you're not willing to accept them at the end.
Okay, so if it's the first time for me signing a term sheet and selling my company, what is the most common mistake?
To sign a too long exclusivity without realizing the implications.
That can be a risk. So you get held in that situation.
Yeah, because basically your bargaining position is the strongest before you accepted the term sheet with a given price that can be reduced if the buyer finds issues or you don't agree to specific reps and warranties, and you sign the exclusivity. So before the buyer has you, you are more free to negotiate than later on.
So read through carefully.
Yeah.
And that was the term sheet part.
The term sheet. Step number 2.
Thank you. And if you have any more questions about this, don't hesitate to drop them down below here in the comment section. Thank you so much, and don't forget to subscribe and like our channel.